Hi, everybody. I am so excited to introduce you to my guest today. And he is the CEO and founder of RippleMatch. He's going to tell you a little bit about it. And his name is Andrew Myers. So I'd like to welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I love the mission behind everything you're doing.
Yeah, I was just saying that before we started recording and the podcast came on, that we were like chatting away about diversity and inclusion, and there's so much for us to talk about. So I'm actually really pumped to hear your views on it, because I have been stalking you on social media and LinkedIn, not in a weird way, but on everything that you guys are up to. Do you want to tell everybody who's listening a little bit about RippleMatch and what you do?
Yeah, so excited to have this conversation. And yeah, in terms of RippleMatch, our whole mission is making it possible for college students to get amazing jobs, no matter where they go to school, what their socioeconomic backgrounds are, what their racial and gender backgrounds are. And so a lot of what we do is use technology to even the playing field. The way RippleMatch works is no matter where you go to school, whether it's a university, whether it's a community college, you can fill out a profile of everything that you're looking for in a job, and a lot on your sort of values, motivations, preferences. And then we're actually able to match you with great jobs all over the country. And so the sort of difference between, I think, RippleMatch and like a traditional job board is that companies really trust the algorithm to sort of unearth talent in places that they maybe haven't traditionally gone. They may be doing 70% of their recruiting at, a really narrow subset of schools, but then they'll use RippleMatch to sort of broaden out and make sure that they're not missing phenomenal talent that's distributed all over the country.
Oh, it's so good. I was actually watching one of your clients today. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention them, but they have a YouTube video up. I think it's Lenovo.
Oh yeah, we love working with Lenovo, and
yeah,
it's been an amazing partnership on that side of things.
But they were singing your praises, and I was watching it. And one of the things that I wanted people to realize, so a lot of things that happen with these enterprise companies in the States, and I know that you have like a cross section of RippleMatch is a cross section of companies that they work with, but a lot of these big companies or the Fortune 500s or whatever it would be, they generally have a very narrow view of the colleges or universities or graduates. So then it means that they don't get a diverse range of talent out there. So it's free. RippleMatch is free for the candidate. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, it's free and always will be on the candidate side of things. And yeah, to the point that you're making there, I mean, it really has to do a ton with sort of creating RippleMatch. I went to Yale for undergrad, but I transferred in, and so I vividly remember, what it was like to grow up in Colorado, where most of my friends were at, the University of Colorado and Colorado State, and both my parents were teachers, so I came from a pretty different socioeconomic background than a lot of my friends at Yale. And I remember just getting there and thinking, all these jobs that Yale students get access to that my friends aren't, it's crazy because, talent's distributed all over the country. And I think it's a really bizarre way to sort of determine someone's future based off of where they get into school at age 18, and who their high school guidance counselor is or how they did on a standardized test. And so with RippleMatch, the whole idea was to kind of use technology to even the playing field and make it possible for great candidates all over the country to get connected with really amazing opportunities.
I love that. And what I find really interesting is, how much really it depends on accessibility. I mean, I remember when I was younger, a lot younger, my guidance counselor told me that I should be a hairdresser because I was from a working class family, and not that there's anything wrong with being a hairdresser if you have a passion for it, but it was just no, because I wanted to go and experience all these different things, and she just couldn't see me outside of my postcode. So I think what's great is that you're giving people across the country, and I don't know if your plans are international yet, but you're giving them the accessibility to just even know that those kind of roles are out there.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful example that you just shared. And I think it's true for so many college students, right? They might be brilliant in a number of areas, but so often what we know is the lives that our parents experienced. And so part of what's kind of magical about RippleMatch is because it brings opportunities to candidates, they can sort of trust the system to get to know them, figure out where they might be good. And sometimes those opportunities that are brought to them are things that they would have never considered, but are actually a really good fit for who they are. And so that's one of the aspects of what we do that I'm most passionate about. And I think why we've sort of invested so much in candidate experience over the years as well.
Well, you've lived it. So I think that once you've lived it, and I mean, you know what it was to land in Yale, and sometimes it can be like another planet, you know. I remember even, I mean, again, I'm a recruiter fundamentally, like that's literally, you know, what my craft is. And I remember when I started, it was a temp job and I'd moved home from Dubai, and it was really bizarre because I thought that I had to pay the agency. Like I had no idea how it was supposed to work. You know, I was like, do I have to give them 20% of my salary, or, you know, but other people who are from different kind of socioeconomic backgrounds were so familiar with it and, you know, so au fait with the whole system that they were miles ahead of me. But, you know, we got there. I wanted to ask you one thing before I forget. You mentioned, do you have, like specific processes when you're hiring internally for RippleMatch? So I know what you do like as a product and things like that, but when you're building your RippleMatch team, what does that look like? Because I think I heard from Janelle potentially that, like, you know, how you try to attack talent in from diverse backgrounds.
Yeah, we work incredibly hard at that internally. And I think you have to be really smart and really systematic about it because unfortunately there is so much systematic bias built into the system. And I think you have to be really thoughtful about kind of overcoming that. And so, you know, even if you're well-intentioned, if you're just relying on job board applications in tech, for most roles, you know, 80% of those applications are white men applying for jobs, often from backgrounds where technology was sort of more accessible and more mainstream. And so if you want to actually build a team that represents the population as a whole, you've got to invest a lot at the outset of the process, because once candidates are in process, you've got to treat them completely equally, but you've got to make sure that exposure is really broad at the outset. So for our early career hiring, we use RippleMatch to do that. So we do have a little bit of a advantage, but it's been amazing in terms of kind of helping us just build out, you know, a much more representative kind of early career team. And then when it gets to the more senior positions, we actually invest a ton in agency relationships and really focus on building pipelines that are either underrepresented minority heavy or female heavy, and really incentivize agencies to go out and kind of reach the candidates that are naturally coming into our funnel. It doesn't mean we're perfect. There's always work to do.
Of
And I think
course.
we have to be really attentive to it. But we do just invest really heavily in trying to get the kind of most representative pool we can at the top of the funnel. And then inclusion obviously matters a ton too. And we just kind of bend over backwards to kind of create the most inclusive, welcoming culture that we can. And obviously,
Yeah.
virtually has meant it out a little bit. And COVID's thrown us a few challenges this year, but overall, it's something we just care a lot about as a company. And that really, really matters.
Yeah, and do you know what as well though? Like I work with a lot of different companies like internationally, and a lot of them have diversity on their website, but like it's fine attracting somebody, you know, but then it's like, how do you retain them? You know, how do you make them feel that they have like a seat at the table, you know? And I think that that was a really important thing that you said. It's the inclusion and the equity part of it, especially on the sourcing for recruiters, because I think it was, I don't want to shame him, it was the CEO of a bank potentially. He said that he couldn't find good talent from the African American community. I think it was the Wells Fargo CEO, but which shocked me, because sometimes you have to, like, I had a look at their job specs and things like that, and even sometimes the way they're worded won't attract diverse candidates. Like there's a whole like approach that you need to make sure that you're bringing these people in. I think it's great that you guys are really helping companies do that within RippleMatch. But I do have another question for you. I've loads of questions for you, but I do have another question for you. RippleMatch kind of falls under HR tech or rec tech, would that be? But it's one of the first, I won't say the first, but that it's really focused on the candidate. So, you know, very normally HR tech, it's like about the company, the enterprise, how we can do
Yeah, a
this.
little stodgy and kind of just
Yeah,
you
you like spun it.
software. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you've spun it on its head. So, I mean, a lot of people would have thought potentially that you couldn't make money or be successful when it's focused on the candidate who's not paying. Tell me what your thought process was with that, like, because it is very, very like like job hunter or candidate centric.
Yeah, it's funny. I think honestly it stems from the fact that we just we originally sought out to solve a problem for our friends in college. And so I don't think we were thinking about it through like a traditional MBA lens. It wasn't like, how can we make as much money as possible as easily as possible? It was sort of like,
Yeah.
how do we create a new system, right? And to do this in a much more data driven, diversity focused, just inclusive way. And I think that this sort of like realization was you kind of need both. So companies need an
Hmm.
operating system that allows them to sort of intuitively understand their data. If they don't realize that they're struggling with representation in a given group in real time, it's very hard for them to proactively remedy it. If they're not able to successfully host virtual events, it's hard for them to reach broader groups of candidates. And so we realized there was some maybe like less sexy software that needed to be built companies do the job well. But on top of that, we really needed to build a terrific marketplace for candidates. And I think it made the first couple of years challenging because we're just like taking on so much at once. And even now, it's incredibly complex, kind of sophisticated product. But I think it's been worth it because if you can kind of pull all this stuff together in tandem, I really do believe that most companies want to do better in these areas. They just need software that actually makes it possible for them. And so by sort of combining these different elements, which I agree with you is maybe a little bit less like traditional, like classic
I like
HR.
it though. It works.
Yeah, that's kind of been our sort of magic, I guess, in terms of bringing this all together.
And so when you started, like, so you said the origin of the idea was like helping your mates out, like in trying to, like, that was it. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to build this machine and then exit after 5 years. But so it was like this really like, how do we get our friends or this or that, like access to these great opportunities? When did you realize that something had changed, that something had clicked and this is going to be maybe bigger than you imagined?
Yeah, I don't think I really even knew like what a venture capitalist did fully when we started the company, right? I was a history major. Eric was computer science. We weren't like majors like plotting out the future. But I think that I think there were a few moments along the way that were really significant. I think there is a beauty in building products and just getting to listen to customers, and there is a certain honesty that comes from getting a company to buy your software for the first time. And so I think it probably took us 18 months of product development and building out the candidate side before we even had a single customer. And then it starts to like spiral.
Yeah. Do you
Unbelievable.
remember your first customer?
Yeah, I vividly remember her name. Her name was Jodie Fournier. She was a leader at Corn Ferry, actually, which is
Wow.
the recruitment space you've probably heard of.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
she I think she fully got the vision and kind of what it could be. I have to say that early product probably left a little something to be desired. A lot of engineering work got into it since, but she took a chance on us and gave us a wave
Yeah.
of amazing feedback. And I'm super grateful to people like that because I think so often there's these leaders in these enterprise companies who are a little more innovative, and especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion, which is a relatively, unfortunately, a somewhat new space in
Mhm.
terms of getting serious investment on the corporate level. I think you need people who are willing to kind of take chances and try out new stuff. And I think that's what allows these new technologies to sort of land and then make a difference. But without some people sort of taking a chance and trying it out, it would have been really difficult to kind of, prove that initial traction and actually get a shot to make this all happen.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's so funny that like you were, well, of course, I wouldn't think that you'd forget, but I think it's so funny that you remember the exact name and how like the product has developed and things since then. Did you imagine that you would get to, like, when you got your first sale, did you think that you would be like, on podcasts and chatting to people and hiring, across the country? Like, did you envision that it would get to this point?
Those early days were pretty humble. I think we were in like a cramped kind of WeWork conference room where we, were jamming a big team there. A big team was like 6 people, but it felt like a big team because the office was so small. And yeah, I think it is amazing to sort of see the level of scale it's getting. I think human beings in general, it's hard for us to understand how things compound. And so when an idea really takes off, especially within technology, in a relatively short time, it can go from this sort of fringe small thing to a really big sort of movement and company. And I think as human beings, you do your best to keep up and sort of internalize all the learning, but it's not natural for anyone totally, right? You got to kind of adjust
Yeah.
to it appreciate the slightly unusual like speed of a journey and what that can be like.
I think that as well, sometimes it's like you're in the eye of the storm, so you don't really realize like the speed that you're going, or like that, you know, you're just doing what you do. I'd be interested to know as well, like when you spoke to your family, or when your partner spoke to family and said, you know, or we're dropping out and we've turned down this job with Facebook and this is our idea. What was their reaction when you kind of like let them know that this was what you were going to pursue? To any of the entrepreneurs out there listening, I'd be interested on getting your
I
input.
remember like literally like rehearsing in the mirror what I was going to say to my mom, because I mean she was a teacher, and like, you know, she would wake up with me before school to help me study, and here I am a year from graduating from Yale, which I think for her was like, you know, on a more traditional path, kind of a dream, and suddenly I sort of wanted to chase this crazy idea, and I'll never forget it. And I remember thinking she was going to be really upset, and I think that she was actually like, go for it, make it happen. And
So
you know,
good.
I think that's an amazing moment and an amazing amount of support to have from parents. And you know, I don't. I think in a way it was an incredible risk. I think at the same time I also did benefit from having tons of sort of like being able to go back to Yale if it failed, and having a family that was supportive of it is also a huge form of privilege. And I think when you sort of do think about like the venture climate in general, I think, while it is amazing to be able to take a risk and does take some courage, I think we also need to sort of create a system where it's easier for people to do that. And there's a little bit of a softer landing if entrepreneurs, you know, aren't able to work or whatever. So that's something that personally
it's not that they just like lose everything. Yeah, no, exactly that. But I mean, like that's the thing. We're actually doing something in Ireland at the moment where they're trying to encourage, like, you know, entrepreneurship, even like in there's a group that, like, you know, you can go to with your ideas for, like, you know, a startup or something like that, and it's like not for profit, but then they chat through your idea, because as you said earlier, what you did was come up with a solution for a problem, you know, and that's really where all these great companies seem to start. In relation to everything that you've achieved with RippleMatch so far, do you have anything coming up, like any kind of new I suppose projects or anything like that on the horizon?
Yeah, so I think there's two really exciting things. Just about a month ago, we just announced a $23.5 million funding round, and so it's really amazing to get to sort of scale up our team. The team size will basically double this year. We'll pass 100 employees, which sounds like a really just like terrific milestone, and I think is a validation of a lot of the hard work the team's put in this year. But then on the product side, one thing I'm just incredibly passionate and excited about is we're launching a CRM. So not a customer relationship management platform, but a candidate relationship management platform. And what that's designed to do is let companies really stay in touch with and nurture candidates that have been in their process. And so if you sort of think about it as a candidate, right? Like there's so many times you go into a job search, you go and do all this work, you just sort of miss the job, right? You're kind of a silver medalist. And then the company loses touch with you, and they might have actually thought after you gained additional experience or you know, another role opened up that you could be a great fit, but all the data just gets lost because it's such a huge mess. So we're basically building a product that makes it possible for companies to keep in touch with all of the candidates they've interacted with, to get sort of real-time updating information on all of those candidates, and then to, you know, market and nurture those candidates. And so they can get them into events, get them into new roles, whatever it might be. And so I think it'll just be one other really kind of powerful element of the full RippleMatch system, in addition to our sourcing product and our events product, and will hopefully provide just a better candidate experience, because I think too often it's just a really awful experience looking for a job, and I think it'll help kind of streamline that process for everybody a little bit, hopefully.
So when is that launched? When is the big reveal?
So we have just like basically launched the product with a number of beta customers who tend to be early users who are really kind of invested with what we're doing. But the early feedback's been terrific, and so I think we'll likely take it to the sort of broader market at the start of Q3, and everybody will be able to kind of purchase RippleMatch CRM.
Phenomenal. And so with that, and I find it as a recruiter, actually, I spoke to a few candidates yesterday, and they told me that they normally don't deal with recruiters because, you know, either the resume goes into a black hole or they never get a call back, because it's either, you know, you're either a fit for this role or and then it's good luck. So I think it's really great that you're creating that for candidates so they can manage their journey and do all of those different things. I'm trying to think if there's anything else like that on the market. I can't think of anything.
No, I really appreciate that. And yeah, I think that sort of automation is part of what makes it so unique. I think it sounds like a nice idea being able to apply for any job you want, but when the reality is you spend all this time filling out applications and then companies are just inundated and have thousands and thousands of applications, so they never get back. Then candidates need to apply for even more jobs. So it sort of creates this destructive flywheel that's really discouraging and a really huge waste of time for everybody involved. And I think what we're just trying to do is really use data and matching and automation to kind of cut through the noise and make it possible for people to feel confident in their job search, that when they get matched with an opportunity, they're actually going to get to talk to a human being.
Imagine that.
We'll make sure they get the interview, and you know that's really the core of what our sourcing product does on the candidate side.
No, I love it. And I think that like from a recruiter's perspective and the amount of candidates that I speak to, I think that would solve so many problems for them. Because even when I say like, oh, so who have you applied for? And they're so frazzled that they're like, I don't remember, like, like, did you apply directly? Was it through an agency? And they just have no tracking system, or because I know what it's like to be unemployed. Like, it's the pressure of it, and thinking of your rent and this and that. And then you start to apply for roles that maybe are too junior for you and you don't get called back for them. So it's like this vicious circle where your confidence is just affected negatively, in the end. Like it's tough for them.
I vividly remember applying for junior year internships. I think I probably, put in 30 job applications, and here I was thinking I'd worked on my resume and I was all ready to go, and I probably heard back from maybe 2 or 3 companies. I mean, it was a minuscule sort of percentage of companies that I thought were a good fit, and it was just because I didn't actually know what I was qualified for and what I wasn't, and really some guidance that I just couldn't get through the career services office.
Yeah, no, I get that. And it's like when you ask somebody like what salary you're looking for, and they're like, oh, literally, I don't care. Like, just give me a job. So no, I think that like RippleMatch, and this is so exciting. I'd love to, I can't wait to like have a look and have a play around with it and see it. You'll have to come back
on.
The
product. It's really fun to see in action. And yeah, I'm obviously biased, but we worked pretty hard on making it as sort of intuitive and user friendly as possible.
Well, look, if I can use it, anybody can use it. I spoke to a couple of your team members as well, and there seems to be a common thread that runs through your company. I won't mention the person's name, but I was talking to one of your employees, and they seem really bought into RippleMatch. So not just the product, because I understand like that you're passionate about the product and things like that, but they seem bought into, like, there's an energy in the office, this person had mentioned, and it's like everybody seems to be on the same team. There's really like a growth mindset within the company, and people are I suppose engaged. How did you set out to create that, or was it something that you think that filters down, like culture filters down from the top?
Yeah, I think in the early days, some of it happens accidentally, right? Companies, I think, just sort of represent the early leadership in the company, and it's really easy for it to take form. But as you get bigger, you have to, I think, be really intentional about culture and how you hire and how you promote. And there needs to, I think, be a really clear system of shared values that everybody kind of buys into. And so I think on a really high level, I always think about it. I don't think it's enough to be really talented. And it's not enough to just be a really good person. You sort of need both. And I think we try to attract people who sort of have the drive and the talent to really want to make a big impact in the world, but also want that impact to be in a positive way. And I think we also really do try to foster people who I think are willing to just, like, I think you got to care, you got to be willing to be blunt and honest with people about feedback. And I think you've also just got to like be committed to like consistently growing and improving. And I think, well, I'd like to say we have like some brilliant, like, cultural values. I think a lot of it does come down to hiring. I mean, I think obviously you've got to do a lot right, and you got to be really welcoming when people get in and have high standards. But I also think you've just got to be really deliberate about who you hire. And I think so many companies, it's like you're going to spend, 3 years working every single day with that person, but your interview process is 2 hours and you don't get to know them on kind of level. And so I think it really does stem from our employee base rather than top down. And I think it's been more just, being lucky enough to attract a pretty special group of people, and then they all kind of inspire and motivate each other too. On a large level.
Well, I don't know about, because there's something that you said there. I don't know about it being lucky. I think whether you knew it or not, when there was just 6 of you in the room, you did start with a purpose, like, and there was like, and this is like the whole thing that we'd mentioned. Like for me, it's like tech for good, that like it's not just about going in somewhere, or like for me, like as a recruiter, it's not about making money. Of course, I want to be able to pay mortgage or whatever, but I'd also like, I know that a job is central to someone's life, whether they get it, whether they don't, it affects their family, their wider community, any of those kind of things. So I don't say every day, but because the pandemic kind of, distracted us all for a minute, but I try and, set that intention for the day, like when you're going to go and talk to people or do this or do that. Or even if you're talking, for me to talk to a client, like somebody set up a business or taking a risk. So you have to be respectful with their brand and their time. I don't always get it right. I do my best. Is there any, don't know if you can answer this, but is there any kind of mistake or lesson, maybe lesson's better than the word mistake, that you've had like in your career that you took something from?
Definitely. Oh my God, we make mistakes. I'd say everyone gets wasted, right? And that's what happens when you're moving fast, and hopefully you learn from them quickly. And yeah, I'll dive on that in 1 second. You said one other thing that just like sort of triggered a thought for me, just around like, getting a candidate a job being one of the most like sort of significant things that you can do. And I do think there is something magic about jobs. It plays such a huge role in people's identities, their ability to provide for their families. There's a reason that pretty much every single election is about the economy, right?
Yes. It's your sense of purpose and your sense of worth.
Yeah, and I think one of my like favorite things is we send out this email each week that shows the faces and the sort of schools and names of every student who's gotten hired through RippleMatch and the company that they're going for. And you see these companies like Amazon, Ernst & Young, name brand terrific opportunities. And if you sort of think back to how things were traditionally, a lot of the faces getting sent to those schools would have been typically upper class, Ivy League, predominantly white. And we look at these hiring reports and it's like, there's amazing students from, Wichita State and Spelman and, all of these sort of different schools all over the country, North Carolina.
Goosebumps. I have goosebumps. I think it's amazing.
And so we send that out to our whole team. And I do think that if you don't get goosebumps, like seeing something like that, this might not totally be the right place for you. Obsession with like, okay, like no matter where you are, you should have access to great opportunities is really what like drives us. And it's just like a huge element of kind of what I think RippleMatch is.
No, it's like, even like listening to that, it's like, it's the humanity behind it, and it's like, it's a person. And even if you're giving bad news, like you can give bad news and say, okay, you didn't get it, but this is the feedback. It was super positive, reapply in 6 months, blah, blah, blah. It's just the way that I think the way that you deliver it, it's the whole Gary V thing, of kindness, like it's a superpower. So I think if you try and focus on that, like that's it.
Yeah, just being nice goes a long way. It doesn't mean you're not going to screw up. And as a leader, you make all sorts of it. I guess this like shifts gears still a little bit to the mistakes. Like I think startups are like, I think what makes startups such a powerful force for innovation is that it's an environment where, especially in the early days, like you are really incentivized to make mistakes, because if you're not making a few mistakes, you're probably not learning quickly enough, especially when it comes to like product and product development. But it's true in a lot of areas. And I think that sometimes as companies get bigger, they get political and there's an incentive to always be right or to always look good. But I think one thing I definitely try to do some as a leader, and I know a lot of our leadership team focuses on, is just being willing to like call out when you screw up. So like, I mean, this is a small example of it. Like earlier this week, like I were in a meeting where I realized like maybe like 10 minutes in, the way I'd structured it was totally just not going to like
atrocious.
I was like looking for, and it was like getting bogged down. And I think just being able to say like, I structured this meeting totally wrong. Let's like reset it and try it. Like it's a little like you have a little bit of that. Oh no, I'm like admitting like a mistake or whatever. But I think if you can just embrace that as a part of how you do, you don't spend time sort of pretending an apple's an orange and kind of ignoring the reality that you
and
do
expecting everybody else to do the same. No, and I would say to you that like allowing or saying that you've made a mistake, and I found this over the last year, like I worked in another company, and I lost my job like, just around February, March. And what I was thinking was, it was hard for me then as a recruiter to go on LinkedIn and say, this is what's happened. And like, it was the whole thing that we were saying about when you lose your job, like it was a whole like year of lessons for me, because it was like about professional grief and what you actually lose when you say somebody loses a job. And what you said there, even in relation to the meeting about vulnerability, or saying, okay, look, I messed up, let's start again. My biggest fear was telling people this, but once I made myself vulnerable and said, look, this happened, blah blah blah, I'm moving on, or whatever it would be, the amount of people that gave permission to share their experiences has been phenomenal. Like, I have more clients reaching out, I've more candidates reaching out, I've had like all of this like support from people I didn't even know were aware that I was alive, and it's created like a mini family for me, or a mini support network, not a family, but a support network outside of me not working in these huge companies anymore, because this is a startup.
I love that. Yeah, I think like leading through vulnerability and just being vulnerable is like one of the most like important things to kind of embrace in life. And it's not intuitive, right? Like as kids, we grow up and we see these, superstar athletes, and we see them in prime time, or you see the glossed up sort of celebrity
Yeah.
photos, and it's
The Insta filters.
Yeah, and we're sort of not like, the image of success isn't talking about the fact that we're all kind of figuring it out as we grow and that we make huge mistakes. And so I think in the early days of RippleMatch, it was a little harder for me. I think I felt this pressure as like a young founder to like look like I knew the answer, to like have my stuff together. But I think now I definitely realize that like you can be a great leader and you can be a very imperfect leader. And what matters a lot more is trying to do your best, but having the sort of confidence to acknowledge when something went off course, or you didn't live up to the expectations of yourself or the team or whatever it might be. So I don't know. I think good intentions matter a lot.
Yeah, that was literally the word that was in my head when you were saying that, was like the word intention. I think that if your intention is good and you can sleep at night, like, but if the quicker you admit it, or the quicker that you realize there's a mistake and you say it, then the quicker you fix it and then just move on. But I think that's the whole thing of operating within a growth mindset. Whereas like if you have a growth mindset and you're saying like, oh, okay, I made a mistake, and you're in a fixed mindset culture where they're like, okay, no, it's blame, it's this, it's that. That's when I always say to people, it's time to move, because you're never going to align with the company. If you want to, like, maybe somebody like that should probably go to a startup, where it's like you make a mistake, you learn quickly, you move on, you improve. It's like fixing a bug in an app. That's like the startup mentality.
100%. Yeah, I think that's totally right.
In relation to going forward for you or for RippleMatch, what does the rest of 2021 look like for you, other than the launch of this like amazing new CRM?
Yeah, so it's really a ton of just kind of bringing together everything that's happened over the past few years from a product perspective. So we launched an events product last year that's had really good traction. CRM's coming out, and then this sort of auto match is what we call it, but our automated sourcing product has been kind of our bread and butter and signature product. And I think more and more we're becoming kind of a complete operating system for the companies that we work with. So in the early days, it was amazing to be able to automate finding, high quality, diverse talent from all over the country. And I think that was really powerful. But I think what we've started to realize that to like maximize our impact, we also need to be able to help companies manage their candidates from other sources, to keep track of all those existing relationships. Data analytics goes a really long way. And I think our overall goal is to really democratize hiring and just make it possible for companies to actually hire people based off of who they are rather than their surface credentials, and do that in like a deeply data-driven way. But I think that requires a pretty immersive, comprehensive system and buy-in from a huge number of companies. And so that expansion is already really underway. But I'd say by and large, it's this mix between sort of continuing to add to that suite while also continuing to perfect everything that we're already doing, and then just continuing to kind of grow both our candidate base and our customers.
I'm so excited to see the evolution, but I definitely think you need to get like a RippleMatch online store and have that on a t-shirt, like democratize the hiring process.
I love it. Yeah. And we like owe it to our students, right? Like I think they've played like such a huge role in it. And increasingly the big ask we also get is, this has just been terrific for us in the early career space. Can you help us with that next job transition? Or as a student, right? I've used RippleMatch to find my internship and my full-time job. now I'm 2 years in and getting ready for the right transition. And I think there's a delicate arc between being, a leader in a given category and starting to expand into new categories. But that's something we're always weighing and always thinking about. And I think ultimately RippleMatch will probably, hopefully, if we have, the right amount of sort of skill and lab, play a role in transforming hiring as a whole, not just university hiring.
Well, it needs it, to be honest. And I say that as a recruiter who's like working with like a cross section of companies. It definitely, sometimes I feel like I'm running into a wall, because trying to encourage companies to like, change approaches. So that's why I was so happy that you agreed to come on the podcast, because I think it's really important for people to see how successful you can be with a piece of tech that's for good, that's changing, not just like hiring, but like society. Because as we said, giving people in these like underserved or underprivileged or whatever it would be, diverse communities access to opportunity, you're actually changing society. It's you should be proud.
I really appreciate that. And yeah, I sometimes think recruiters are sort of like the unsung heroes of a lot of these organizations. Like, I think occasionally, they get in trouble for being pushy or whatever it might be, but most of the recruiters we work with are like genuinely trying to provide a phenomenal candidate experience, B, improve diversity and inclusion, and C, have enormous headcount goals that are sort of just tossed on them, often from above without a lot of like advanced planning, and it's their job to sort of navigate it and figure it out. And so we really see recruiters as kind of like our best partners in terms of being
100%.
able to do this. And ideally, technology can automate some of the more manual, repetitive aspects of the job, but that frees recruiters up to really spend time on human connections, which is an area
which is where they're probably better at.
You can't replace, right? And so
Yeah,
it's about optimizing how recruiters spend their time and really partnering with them to kind of
well, that is music to my ears. Music to my ears. So I'm delighted to hear that. We need all the help that we can get, us poor recruiters. But look, Andrew, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast. We will share links. I'm going to put up the Lenovo and some other links to what you guys are up to, and I'll put the website up and let everybody have a look at it. But yeah, thank you so much, and you are more than welcome to come back on at the end of the year or before then and tell us about how your official launch went with the CRM system.
Yeah, this was terrific. I'd love to come back at some point, and congrats on all the success so far, and excited to keep listening and hear some of your other interviews as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care.
Have a great day. Bye.